So it's the International University Sport Federation, which I know doesn't acronym to FISU, but it's because it's in French. So it's based in Lausanne, Switzerland, in the same area as the IOC. It's actually also in the Olympic capital. All of the countries around the world that compete in the Olympics have to be members of the IOC to compete in the Olympics. So it's very comparable to any other international sport federation, but it's such a big scale. So the event that we're hosting, we're expecting up to 170 countries to attend.
G'day guys, coming up on the show today is Mirinda Kidman, Manager of Delegation Services for the FISU World University Games 2025 in Germany, which is specifically happening in the Rhine-Ruhr area, which covers Dortmund, Düsseldorf and Cologne. If you've never heard of FISU before, this episode is going to open your world to one of the largest employers in the sports industry, that is university sport. Specifically, we dive into the World Uni Games, which are the second largest multi-sport event in the world after the Olympics. You'll learn how Miranda crafted her career to this position, what she does, and how she became a standout candidate, plus why she loves being a part of the SportsGrad community all the way over in Germany. Let's go.
I started volunteering.
It's all about who you know in sport.
Am I going to be calling the last 10 seconds of the grand final?
You can connect with the interviewer. The hand goes up when they've got to make a decision.
Having a network is one of the most important things you can do.
I didn't necessarily follow my passion. I followed my curiosity.
Once you've worked in sport, there's no going back.
And then lo and behold, before I left, I got offered two.
Hello and welcome to the SportsGrad Podcast, the ultimate guide to make it in the sports industry, brought to you by Deakin University, home to the world's #1 sports science school. My name is Ruben Williams, and usually I'm joined by my good mate, Ryan Walker. He's on another week of leave this week, so you're just stuck with me today. But each week, we learn about how people made it in the sports industry, and we interview professionals in sport to find out how they made career decisions, what's some of their work habits, the skills that they've built, and everything they do that makes them great. And this is so that you can learn how to get into sport, get promoted, and get thriving in the sports industry. Now, if you've been following the show for a little while, a little quick update from me. I like to travel, as some of you may know. And last year, I embarked on about a 6-month digital nomading trip around the world and took the podcast with me. And so would chime in from all these different random places like Morocco or Portugal or Bali or wherever. One particular one came from India and Dubai, where I ended up as well. Anyway, I am starting that again. I'm not going to go for quite as long this time, but I am coming to you from Ubud in Bali at the moment. So I'm going to be here for a couple of weeks. And then in the third week, I'm actually going to be joined by about 10 friends. We are having a week-long holiday together as a group of 11. And the reason for that is we all turned 30 this year. So to celebrate our collective 30ths, we're all coming together for a week in Bali, which should be great fun. Now, if you are not following us on LinkedIn, make sure you jump on there and connect with us. And also, if you're not aware of the SportsGrad community, I would highly recommend you check that out. Head to our website and you can find out all about what it means to be a member and how we can help grow your career in sport. Now, as always, we like to give you a bit of an update and members an update on what is going on in the community. So I'm going to kick off today with a few wins, and this one is an absolute epic. This one is coming to you from Brodie Burrows. He has just landed a role with QMS Media as one of the lead social media producers during the Olympic Games. So he's going to be creating all these different graphics that are spread around the country celebrating Australia's achievements at the Olympics. So well done to you, Brodie. Pretty good for a guy who lives out in the middle of nowhere in South Australia, not too far from Port Lincoln. He's done some incredible jobs in social media at the Australian Open and now with the Olympics. So doesn't matter where you come from, you can make it in sport. Megan Harris, shout out to you. You've just completed your sport and event athlete coordinator internship position at Unisport Australia, which is fitting because Miranda has also come from Unisport Australia today, who's in our guest interview. And that was also where I did my very first internship in sport, Unisport Australia. So Megan, we'll have a chat about that and compare notes. So well done to you. Now, as always, we have plenty of events going on inside the SportsGrad community. So a few ones to mark down in your calendar. I hope you've got your pen ready. First one is Rookie Speed Networking Night coming up tonight, 24th of June when this goes out. For our pros, speed networking is going to happen on Monday, the 1st of July. We heard you. We acknowledge that you love a Monday session better than any other time slot, so we're moving it to Mondays. hopefully that can kick off your week on the right foot and give you time at the back end of the week to play catch up in with whatever you've got going on. Now, this is another epic event coming up. We are doing a finance masterclass with Sheila McGoy from Cricket Australia. Sheila works in the finance team there. She's a good friend of mine from back in the day when I was working at Cricket Australia. And as per the request of a lot of members, they wanted to learn about budgeting. How do you manage finances for a project or anything you've got going on? Because usually it's not something you get exposed to until you are thrown into a managerial position. So Sheila is going to come along and teach us all about managing finances, managing budgets within the context of working in sport. So that is coming up on the 26th of June at 12:30 in the afternoon, Australian time. And beyond that, we also have a career Q&A coming up with Will Roberts. Will works for the New Zealand Olympic Committee, and we'll get the chance to pick his brain about what is going on there. And we've also got a presenting masterclass coming up with Ankita Karungalekar, who you might have heard on the podcast at the start of this year, and another masterclass coming up with Kim Ramnath on TikTok, as well as another one on project management from Lyndall McInnes, who's a project manager at the AOC. So there is so much going on and so much coming up. It is a wonderful time to be a SportsGrad member. And as always, if you're in Melbourne, Coffee Club is happening on Friday. Unfortunately, I won't be there. I've heard the mornings have been pretty cold recently. Hopefully that doesn't stop you getting out of bed and growing your networking in sport with the community. So that's a lot to take in. There's a lot of information there. But if you would enjoy a nice little summary of everything that you need to know about how to grow your career in sport, sign up to get the SportsGrad newsletter. Head to sportsgrad.com.au/newsletter to subscribe. There's also a link in our show notes to join. Now, grab a pen and enjoy this chat with Mirinda Kidman.
Are you aiming for a future in sport? Be ready to transform the industry. Study with Deakin and be prepared to redefine what it means to work in sport. Deakin's School of Exercise and Nutrition Sciences is ranked #1 in the world. So if you want to turn your passion for sport into an impactful career, get ready to push the limits of exercise and sports science, sport coaching, sport development, sports management, nutrition sciences, physical education, and more. Apply now to study at Deakin in 2024.
Miranda, welcome to the SportsGrad Podcast.
Thank you.
You must be really enjoying the sporting event calendar over in Europe at the moment, because not only are you preparing for your own major tournament in 2025, but you've also got the Euros happening around you in Germany, and the Paris Olympics is coming up just next door in a month's time. Must be a good time to be working in sport in Europe.
Yeah, it's very busy and everyone seems to know everyone. So everyone knows someone who's working somewhere, or everyone's trying to get tickets off someone, or we get messages all the time in the office, who's got a ticket to the Ukraine game this weekend, for example. It's, super interesting to see the collaboration. So where I work currently, a large majority of our tech team are actually working in Paris. So they're gone for a month. So we've had to also plan around that. It's super interesting.
And so do you guys do a lot of sharing of ideas or shadowing or anything like that to kind of learn from what other events are doing? Like, will people from your event go to these other events to pick up ideas?
Yeah, so it's very dependent on obviously the functional area or the role. So all of the sport teams, so we have the managers of which are the individual sports, they'll all be at their relevant world championships if it's this year, or European championships. For our team or the wider international services team, I've already been to Hungary this year to observe an event, and then I'll be at the World University Rowing Championships, which is the Netherlands, and then across back to Hungary again for the European University Championships, and also looking at winter sports. So even though we're summer games and we're very much the Olympic sports, athletic summer events, we are still going to aim to visit the winter sports and just see the organization internally for admin and delegation services and that kind of thing.
Very, very cool. I know the Brisbane 2032 Olympic Committee are heading over to Paris on a shadowing tour to try and pick up some ideas, even 8-9 years out from the event. So cool to hear that you guys have got so many different opportunities to learn about events at your doorstep too. But we'll dive more into the specifics of FISU and the World University Games later on. We start every podcast, however, with some quick fire questions just so people can get to know you a little bit better. So I'm going to fire off the first one, and that was, what was your first ever job?
First ever job? I mean, my first ever job was an internship. I'd still count as a full-time job, as a full-time internship. Whilst at university in the second year at the American School of Paris, so in France. I went to university in the Netherlands, but I'm British, so it's a bit of an interesting mixture. But yeah, it was working just as an assistant to the athletics director, I think was my title, but just day-to-day international school sports things after school clubs, preparing for events, preparing for international teams coming over. And that was a full-time internship. And then in terms of jobs, I've been in a few different ones, but I think a tour guide on the canal boats in Amsterdam was probably one of the most, in my eyes, real job that I did. I've done a few other ones in retail and supermarkets, but yeah, the tour guide one is definitely a lot of effort, but really fun.
That's very cool. That would have been a lot of fun on the boats in the canals of Amsterdam. What did you study at university?
So I have a bachelor's in international sport management and business, which sounds very niche. It's not super niche. It's essentially a sport management degree combined with an international relations degree in an international environment, which I think is the biggest thing. So everyone in my course was from different countries. A lot of them are from multiple countries. And it was a small course of 50 per year. It's definitely grown now. I was only the 5th year to complete it. And then following that, I went to Loughborough University in the UK to pursue a master's, again, in sport business and leadership, which also sounds very niche, but it was a sport business degree with a specialization in leadership and management.
And what was your favorite sporting moment of all time?
This question goes around the office a lot. I would definitely say London 2012. So London 2012 was my last year of school in the UK, so I was 16 or so. And I'm from close to London, and my family and I spent the whole time there. My dad's Australian, my mum's British. We've already had that international environment. And we went to watch basketball and beach volleyball and those kind of sports. And it was definitely just being in London in general, I would say, for the whole of the Olympics, and also then following with the Paralympics, and the amount that it changed London, especially East London, was pretty impressive at 16, in my opinion.
And what's your favourite interview question that you like to ask of candidates?
Yeah, I would definitely say where they're going next. At the moment, I'm a manager, but I tend to interview those entry levels or the coordinator roles, and they're never going to stay in that role their whole life, and it's okay. And I think people are kind of scared of it being okay to talk about where you want to go. So it's always interesting to find out, yes, you're applying for this role, great, talk about that, but actually what do you want this to get out of this role? Because it might be that an interviewee has picked out specific things that they think are going to lead to their future career in something. And it's very useful to know what they want to go to next or what they want to end up as in 10, 20 years, to see if they're on the same page as what the role entails and if it actually can help them or not.
Yeah, it's good to know that employers out there are aware that some of their jobs are essentially stepping stone jobs, because no one wants to stay in a coordinator job forever. So that's a great question to ask. And what's one book or podcast that you would recommend that has helped you at work?
Yeah, when I left uni, I was like, I'm not going to read for years. I did a research-based master's. But I would say at the moment, it's mainly The Diary of a CEO, which is Stephen Bartlett, who is quite big in the UK. I mean, big internationally, but especially in the UK because he's on Dragon's Den, so Shark Tank, and just such a young entrepreneur. But the people he gets on are so different. So you could be listening to one and it would have someone from a pop group, and then you'd listen to one and have a politician. So, and it's all the similar things. So I think it's very interesting to go listen to that just whilst walking around or going to work, jumping from one to another, but also getting, okay, not everyone is that different. Everyone's got the same kind of, they get the same questions, they have the same conversations. So I think that's, super interesting. And I think I like variety. So I'm not very good at listening to something that's about one thing or consistently. My brain works too fast. So I think the Diary of a CEO podcast is really good.
Yeah, I quite enjoy that one as well. And in terms of platforms that you use in your job, what is one platform that you could not live without? Yeah,
for my job, I always say it's glorified project management. Everything we do is a project, no matter if it's daily communication or setting up for an event. And what I use a lot, apart from the standard Outlook calendar, is project planning or organization tools. So Monday.com is a pretty big one. The company where I'm at now uses Smartsheet, which is very similar. They're all kind of planning and organizational tools that also allow collaborative work. So instead of having to email someone, I've done this, it's now your turn to do this. You can use an online tool and just tag them, and it cuts out a lot of the, let's say, unnecessary chit chat. And then the chat that you do have is actually very beneficial, or the meetings you do have are super beneficial because you can see exactly where everyone is at and exactly, let's say if something is majorly delayed, it will come up in red and you can talk about that without having to have it all in your head. So everything is written down in front of you. You can highlight things as high priority, low priority. So I think those organizational planning tools are probably the most beneficial in what I do at the moment.
Nice. We're a big fan of Monday.com as well at SportsGrad, so good to know it's been used widely. And final quickfire question, if you had 30 minutes to pick anybody's brain, who would it be and why?
Yeah, I would say Usain Bolt at the moment. I'm not a massive athletics person. I mean, I love athletics. I love watching it, especially at the Olympics. But it's more the fact that he was the best in the world at what he does. And that's a bit that interests me. He was playing in Soccer Aid in the UK, which is for UNICEF. It's when the celebrities from England all around the world play England versus the rest of the world in football, in soccer. And he's so dedicated to this, and he's not a footballer, and he's not English. And he ruptured his Achilles on the match the other day for this year. So he's very dedicated. And I just think it'll be interesting to see how it went from a full-time professional athlete, fastest man in the world, to then working in charities, but also doing events such as Soccer Aid and working with UNICEF, and the transition that out of professional sport into like the wider world would be super interesting.
Amazing. Well answered. Plenty of inspiration there for people who want to go and look into any of those resources or people mentioned. Let's dive into your job though. And I'm particularly interested in your role because we've got a bit of a common ground in that you're working for the World University Games happening next year in Germany. And my first ever internship took me to the World University Games in Taipei back in 2017. But back then, when I got told, Ruben, you're going to go to the FISU World University Games, I had no idea who FISU was. I'd heard of the International Olympic Committee, heard of all these other big international bodies, but never heard of FISU. So I was wondering, for those who have got no idea about who FISU are, could you explain who FISU are and what they do?
Yeah. So it's the International University Sport Federation, which I know doesn't acronym to FISU, but it's because it's in French. So it's based in Lausanne, Switzerland, in the same area as the IOC. It's actually also in the Olympic capital. So right next door to the IOC. And it's if you want to compare it, it's very similar. It is the International Federation of University Sport. So within that, they have over 180 countries that are members. So you have the British University Sport Federation, the German University Sport Federation. They're all the national federations, and then continental ones as well, who are members. Same as the IOC, all of the countries around the world that compete in the Olympics have to be members of the IOC to compete in the Olympics. And then FISU will not necessarily hold events themselves, but they will allow countries to bid to host events, or organizations to bid to host events. So the World University Games summer and winter are every other year, and in the year in between there's championships. So exact same as, let's look at like athletics, you have the World Championships and then you have the Olympics a few years later. So it's very comparable to any other international sport federation, but it's such a big scale. So the event that we're hosting, we're expecting up to 170 countries to attend. And these will be all different types. You have Team USA, and their collegiate system is next to none. And then you'll have some countries, smaller island countries, Fiji, and some of those smaller islands, which will still compete and they'll still bring competition. But the funding models are different in each country. And FISU act as the international federation, so really support the development of university sport across the world and the power it has. A lot of people that compete at FISU events go on to Olympics or go on to World Championships or Commonwealth Games. So it's very much a stepping stone to compete at a FISU event. You can be between 18 and 25. So it's very much geared at that university stage. And most common practice is within the countries. So let's say Australia is sending a team to the World University Games next year. They'll speak to the National Federation for Athletics. It's actually that national federation that pick the team. So it's very much collaborating within their home country, to then come to a FISU World University Games, winter, summer, or championships, and then represent their country. You don't have to be studying in that country. You're a national. So same as the Olympics, what's in your passport. Sometimes people have multiple. What's on their passport is who they represent. If they have multiple, they represent the same country they do at international meets or events. So yeah, it's one of those, organizations. Once you hear about it, you'll see it everywhere. You might not realize it is FISU. If you have, we're in Rotterdam for the World University Rowing Championships. Someone might just come to that as a spectator. Oh, it's a big international rowing event. They won't necessarily realize it's FISU running it or the local organizing committee that FISU appoints to run it until they've really been there on site or spoke to someone. But then once you do see it, it is everywhere.
Yeah, they are massive. I didn't realize how big they were until I got introduced to the university sports scene. And when I was there, I got told that the FISU World University Games are the second largest multi-sport event in the world after the Olympics. I think in Taipei there was over 10,000 athletes and officials, and it was all set up very similar to the Olympic Games where you had your athlete village and then you had all your sports scattered around Taipei. So you could walk into the dining hall and sit down, and we literally had Carl Lewis sitting at the end of our dining room table, who I think he was a coach of the athletics team for University of Houston or something, but was joining the USA team at the time. And so you got all these like old Olympians that come down and help the next generation up. But you've worked in Australian university sport before and now on a global scale as well. In Australia, we don't typically know who FISU are and don't know about these events, but overseas it seems to be quite highly regarded. Perhaps you can correct me if I'm speaking out of turn, but I was wondering if you, having seen both sides of the coin, why is FISU and their events so much bigger outside of Australia, in Europe and the USA, for example? I
would say it's obviously to do with funding. Holding an event in Australia, in FISU events, to allow everyone to take part, to make it a fair playing field, there's a limit on what they can charge countries to enter or compete at, and also what they can, I guess, a participation fee is what we call it. It's standardized. So holding, working in euros or in Swiss francs is where the headquarters are. Holding an event in, let's say Germany is very clear. Then taking it over to Australia is just that higher cost, and then trying to get countries to come without wanting to increase the cost to kind of exclude people for their economic resources is very unfair. So FISU really tried to maintain a standardized approach. It's very similar with the European University Games, the exact same concept. This year they are in Hungary, near Budapest. Again, a set participation fee. No matter which country you come from, no matter how much funding you have, everyone pays the same participation fee. And holding it in certain countries, it's not going to happen. In 2029, it's going to be held in North Carolina in the USA. So that's going to go to the US, and that's going to be a whole different way of working. In 2 years' time, it's going to go to South Korea. So it's very different. They also try to spread it across the world. That's not to say that they won't potentially have championships in Australia or nearby, but at the moment, it depends on the country. Also in the UK had one many years ago. To now try to hold an event and to only be able to charge X amount per participant that comes is very hard economically. And due to the other calendar of the events that happen in Europe, it's very unique that this event is in Europe. The Winter Games are also in Europe in 2025 for the first time. So not the first time, but the first time winter and summer are in very close together. So the Winter Games are in Torino in January, and then following that in July, it's the Summer Games in Germany. But then after that, then you go off to South Korea, and then you go off to North Carolina. So it's very a spread, and potentially could happen in Australia, but it would require a lot of government support and a lot of state funding, which is what we currently get in Germany for this event. Right.
So it's simply more expensive to run in Australia, therefore less events, therefore less exposure to Australian people, therefore we just have no idea who FISU are.
Yeah, but all it takes is one university or the National University Sport Federation of that country to really want to get involved, or they want to bid. So you have to bid 6-7 years out for championships, which could happen. I see it happening in certain sports in Australia that would be geared to maybe other sports. But yeah, all it takes is the funding to come through or a grant to be won, and then that bidding process can happen. But then again, you're bidding against other countries. And if they show it's more economically viable and more people can take part and it's more of a fair playing ground, everyone to fly into the middle of Asia or Europe, then over to Australia, it might also be a kind of competitive edge for the bidding process.
Yep. I do recall Australia hosting the Sailing University Championships a few years back. So hopefully we see more physio events in Australia in the future, because they are terrific. And actually through the networks that I made at the University Games, I got a volunteer role with the Beach Volleyball Championships, which are hosted in Munich in 2018. So if you can get in physio circles, there's an incredible amount of events that you can stay involved with. But looking at your event happening next year, still a year away, what still needs to happen between now and then for it to come together?
Yeah, so still a year away. It doesn't feel like that long away. At the moment, we have the sports, so we have 18 sports that are going to happen. We roughly know we're going to have 10,000 people come. Just looking at numbers and looking at data, we know where roughly all the sports will be. So we're across a few different cities. And from now to then is a year out of the games, the regulations get released. So they're very much to say in 3-on-3 basketball, you can have a team of maximum 4, for example. It's very basic information, but it's very clear. For example, volleyball, the regulations will say the team entries are capped at X number because that's what the venue can manage and the competition plan can hold. So that's due to come out soon because we're nearly a year out. And then that will be supported by the competition schedule. And then once that's out, it allows, from my department especially, all the countries to start really preparing. Because right now they know the sports, they know roughly what's going on, but they don't have the specific regulations or details that they can then share with their relevant sport lead in their country. And that then comes out. And then following that is just preparation. So we have a whole CAD team. So they do all the drawings of all the venues, all the planning of all the venues. That's well on its way. And then we'll have what they call a head of delegation meeting in April. So that's where we invite the head of delegation for all the countries who are attending, plus those future organising committees to observe, to come and see what we do, to come to Germany in April. And this is my event, so I know a lot about it. We invite them all to come for a 4-day conference, and we go through all the preparation updates that they need to know to plan the management of their team. For example, let's say rowing is here. It is 10, 12 minutes walk to the accommodation. It's 20 minutes from a meeting room, for example. It's very much of this is what the information you need to go and plan internally, because then all the countries have their head of delegation and then have so many people underneath, coaches, and then down to the athletes and the support staff. So that's the biggest thing for myself coming up pre-games. So that's April next year, so 3 to 4 months out. And then a lot of the rest of the year is publications. So accommodation guide will go out, accreditation guide will go out. So how to actually register. Also we're running a webinar, for example, for all the countries to come and ask us questions. We'll have one-to-one meetings with the relevant countries. And then we will have a few visits to the office. So Team USA have come to the office already. Malaysia have come. The Netherlands have come. Chinese Taipei are coming soon. So it's a lot of working with those countries to make sure they're as prepared as they can be for the specifics that our games entail. So the previous games were in Chengdu, China, very different to Germany, very different complex concept. So we have a spread of cities, which also means we have a spread of accommodation rather than this one athletes village. We're not building an athletes village. It's a super sustainable games, but people that have been to Chengdu are used to working and managing their team in a certain way. Or we can have a meeting with all our coaches every day at 9 p.m. Well, you can, but they're not going to all be in the same place. So maybe think about how you manage your own team to make it most beneficial for yourselves and the sports that you need to talk to first or second. I don't know. But at the moment, it's very much making sure internally that all the other functional areas have delegations in their mind. So transport, accommodation, we just basically not fight for the delegations, but we're the voice of the delegations within the office. And then externally, it's helping those delegations and head of delegations plan for our games so they can come to the games and perform the most effectively, efficiently, and leave with a really positive experience.
Amazing. And from an organising committee point of view, could you speak to the headcount of your office at the moment, and what do you expect the headcount to grow to by the time the Games kicks off?
Yeah, the headcount in the office at the moment is around, I think, 120, 130. We also have some externals, some people that are contracted in to do specific things, broadcast, for example. It's going to grow dramatically in terms of the management staff or the core staff. I think that will probably double, but then you have all the working students that are going to come in next year and all the games time staff. So games time staff will be 3 months or the period of the games, so 2 weeks. So they'll be coming in to fulfill those roles of not necessarily lower grade roles at all. Every role is very important, but the manpower that is needed to have the medal ceremony, for example, event presentation, their team is not crazy big at the moment, but once the games come, they have medals every day pretty much in some sports, especially the martial arts sports. So that team is going to grow dramatically. Same for the venue team. Yes, the venues are all booked and confirmed and organised at that point of the games, but then they need to manage the venues. They need to have someone on site in case broadcast has an issue or something like that. So it's going to grow dramatically, both paid staff, paid interns and volunteers.
So there's going to be a heap of opportunity out there for people who are wanting to get involved.
Yeah, especially 3 months roles or roles just over the games period. And it falls in the summer over here. So as it's Germany, it's not very hard. If you don't necessarily need to live in Germany, you can live in the Netherlands on the border, or you can live in Belgium and just come over for those games. So there's a lot of opportunity in 2025 for people to come over, and we're already starting to recruit now and kind of plan for, especially working students and interns now for after Christmas, and then nearer the games, it's those specialists in the specific areas that will also look to hire and freelance and to come over to Germany.
Amazing. Now let's dive into your role specifically. So you're the Manager of Delegation Services. What does that involve exactly?
Yeah, it's not really super clear from the title. All the delegations are all the countries, and all the services are everything that happens in the games. So it's accommodation, transport, food and beverage, medical, anti-doping. It's kind of that. Delegation services are the touch point to the delegations. So it's not like I will make the decisions on anti-doping policy or I make the decisions on where people necessarily sleep. They will come from that relevant functional area within the organizing committee, but the communication of that and the way we educate delegations or share the information will come all through delegation services. So any external communication from the countries or even from athletes that are just looking for more information comes through delegation services. If we don't already have the answers ready to go, we'll get the relevant answers from the relevant functional area and pass it on. Games time specifically, we're in what you call the main information center, so the heart of the games, where they can come for questions, about all the transport, food and beverage, sport, all the main areas. And then we'll do what we call, again, head of delegation meetings, but they're daily during the games. So we'll collect questions throughout the day, and then we'll hold every evening, and we'll hold a meeting where all the countries come and they might have an issue that also impacts everyone else, and we might not have just seen it, which allows us to react very quickly, or we might have already picked up the issue and say, we noticed this bus was delayed. Oh, actually it broke down, but we had a next one coming in 10 minutes time. Don't worry, it's all back on schedule for tomorrow, things like that. So it's very much communication or intercultural communication, because you have to communicate different ways of different countries. Some countries, they'll be super prepared. They won't necessarily ask questions in a room full of people because that's their culture, but they'll come to you afterwards with a long list of questions. Some people will stand up in the room and ask questions in front of everyone, and that's also okay. But you just have to make sure you know who you're working with, how to address people a certain way, what cultural awareness to be aware of for certain religions, the majority in some countries over others, to just really being that. It's an international relations team. I sit in the international team. Delegation services is one part. We have language services. We have protocol, so that's very much medal ceremonies, speeches, flags, all the things that need to be done, like the Olympics, what flag you raise when they win something, what music is played, etc. Then we have international and national technical officials. So not just for getting the athletes, the staff, there's obviously all the officials that we employ for the games and have to manage coming over to Germany We have national ones. We have a lot of international ones that will come. And then we have information services, and that's people that manage all those info points all around the games. So yeah, it's a pretty big team, but it's very much international relations, specifically geared to national sporting teams that are coming to the games.
So that international relations degree you did way back when has become pretty handy then.
Yeah. For me, it's really useful because I worked for the British University Sport Federation, and then the Australian University Sport Federation. And actually way before that, when I was an intern on my final year of my bachelor's degree, I did an internship for Netball America. So netball was pretty common in Australia and England, but not in America. And I was, netball development officer, so my role was to promote the sport. One of those ways was to enter a university team into a FISU event. So that was 2018. And I went with the team from the USA, who were all netball players, who were all third or fourth generation, maybe Jamaican, British. You know, they know the sport of netball. They're high-performance athletes. We took them to Uganda for the FISU World University Netball Championships, competing against other netball teams around the world. And that's also how I got involved with FISU. I didn't necessarily know too much about them until I was already working at a federation, went with the Team USA, as they're called, to the World University Netball Championships, and then really got exposed to, okay, this is not just a championship, they've got multiple championships, they've got games, they've got winter, they've got summer. So yeah, that's also how I got exposed. But it helped me being from technically 3 different countries, working university sport, to now work with 170 countries. But we have a big team in the office. It's not just me talking to 170 countries.
Gee, you're on track to be one of the most recognised names in university sport across the world, up there with Donna Spiethman and Martin Dalton and Bill from the UK, who's actually American. His last name escapes me. I'm sure you came across him.
Thompson.
Bill Thompson. Yep. But your career in university sports really taken off.
Yeah, it's one of those things that I didn't necessarily plan. Like, my plan was I was working in the Netball Federation, and I wanted to development of sport rather than through sport, which is why I took that internship and actually turned into a year-long internship. It was meant to be 6 months, and then I extended it. And then I fell, let's say, into the FISU world, as they call it. And then, so I did that, came back, did the Netball World Cup, did a few other things. And then when I graduated, and I was like, okay, I want to do a master's. I want to go to Loughborough back in the UK. During the master's, you have to write a dissertation or a thesis, and Loughborough offers the opportunity to do it collaboratively. So essentially, you work for an organization, researching for them. And I approached FISU directly. And then I actually ended up writing my dissertation or my thesis for the FISU Education Committee. So actually very different to the event team or the team on the ground doing the operations. I focused on, they have a project called the FISU Volunteer Leaders Academy, which is a great initiative where FISU bring the 1 or 2 representative students from their membership to one place or online to do, let's say, a course or an academy on leadership skills. And the whole purpose is they then go back to their home country and promote university sport in that country. And that's what I did research on. Interviewed many people at FISU, many people who were in the course at the time or the academy, and it's still going to this day. We provided recommendations, academic-based research, and the FISU Volunteer Leaders Academy is actually in June this year, June and September, and they invite 1 or 2 people that get nominated from their country. So from Australia, for example, Australia nominated 2 individuals. I think one from Perth, one from Sydney, and they were not top people, but kind of presence in university sport in their university. They've then been invited to come to this FISU Volunteer Leaders Academy, get all the skills, get all the information, but more importantly, it's the network that they then leave with. And then they go back and they talk to the CEO, or they deliver presentations to their university cohort. And some of those, especially the Australian ones that I've spoke to, are now getting mentored by people within FISU. So it's very much getting the exposure to the network and then running from there, basically.
I'm sure those people would be the ones heavily pushing International Day of University Sport on September 20, I believe it is. I remember that being a big thing back in the day.
Yeah, the International Day of University Sport is UNESCO certified, so it's a formal day in the calendar. and it's September 20. It depends, obviously, which nation you're from. The UK are not at university in September. So it's very different. It's not just about that day. It's about using that day to promote what university sport can achieve or has achieved in that country. So I know when I was at Unisport Australia, there was a social media posts and a challenge, and FISU Oceania, so that's a continental federation, they'll do a walking challenge with an app. So it's promoting in different ways across the world, but it's all promoting the same thing to focus on and show the benefits of university sport to the wider population.
Very good. And how did you get this job? Or how did it come up? You mentioned some of your background, but when did this job enter your realm of understanding, and then what led to you getting accepted for it?
Yeah, so I was at the British University Sport Federation, and I was the international coordinator. So my job at that time was to send athletes to the World University Games, to the World University Championships, to the European University Games and European University Championships. I was coordinating all of those elements for the British Federation, and obviously the British university system is very sport focused, and that happened. And we went to a few events. I did a few major ones, and then the opportunity came up to go over to Unisport Australia. So Unisport Australia have what they call the Unisport Nationals, which is a massive multi-sport competition, and they recruit specific coordinators for specific roles to prepare for the upcoming games, so Unisport Nationals. So I applied for the workforce coordinator role because I've done a lot of volunteering, but I've never really, at that point, managed volunteers. I managed them as a volunteer, but not as paid staff or an employee. I did it when I was at Bucks, the British Federation, but as an addition to my role. So I might do it at a specific event or one-off. And this role, I was then successful, and then I very quickly moved to Brisbane, to Australia. And then I had the responsibility of all the kind of what we say, the volunteer cycle, promotion, recruitment, interviewing, onboarding of all the volunteers for Unisport Nationals the following year, which was in the Gold Coast, and also all the interns as well. So it wasn't just the volunteer workforce, it was a wider kind of additional workforce that was needed to host Unisport Nationals. That happened, that contract ended, it was great. And then I was in Brisbane, and then obviously it's Christmas and then the tennis is happening. So there wasn't necessarily major events in university sport over the summer for yourselves, because there just isn't. The universities are closed. So I was like, okay, what else can I do whilst I'm here to get that experience? And Tennis Australia were then hiring, and they have pre-Australian Open, all the state competitions, so Brisbane Internationals and the United Cups. And I applied with Tennis Australia, spoke to them, and they then recruited me. I combined the two roles for a month. It was very interesting. And then took the Christmas period off to work at the Brisbane International. And we had Andy Murray, Nadal was playing, Naomi Osaka. And my role there was very much the volunteer manager. It's very interesting going from university sport to tennis volunteering, because the volunteers at the tennis have been there. We have ceremonies, and they have 5-year pins, 10-year pins for volunteering. I mean, 10 years ago, I was still not even at uni. So it was a very interesting mix going from the university sport volunteering world, and obviously most of our volunteers, we do have a lot of older volunteers in the retirement category, but the majority would be those student volunteers, to then going to working for Tennis Australia, and all their volunteers are very dedicated to come back every year. They know more than everyone else, most likely. So I did that, and then the Brisbane International happened. It was great. It was hot. It was very hot. And then whilst that was going on, I knew the World University Games were going to Germany. I knew the OC had just started forming. I knew a few people that had already gone from Australia, from the UK over. So I was just kind of keeping my ear to the ground. I spoke to people that were working there, and I said, look, what is coming up? Because you don't know what comes up until it gets posted on the job platform. So I just, had some sort of idea of what their plan was. And then once the job adverts were posted, I was then ready to go straight away. I knew delegation services was a key area because I'd been to the Winter Games previously with the British team. So I'd been to a FISU World University Games. I knew the structure. Most organising committees, even the Olympics, a similar structure. It's very clear. You have the communications team, the sport team, the delegation focus team. So I knew what was coming up. And then, pretty much spoke to some people, applied, got it. And the next thing, I was moving back to Europe and then to Germany from 38 degrees to -5 within about 3 weeks. So it was, very intense. But I think it all, like the time in Tennis Australia was really beneficial also for my role to know the differences. So I think it all worked out, and it's a very full circle moment. So going from working at championships with a country, and then working for a federation, sending athletes, and now being on the flip side and actually managing the event, but with that delegation focus, I think has fitted in really well, and has given me quite unique insight in the office. When I sit in meetings, I'm like, well, in this event, it happened like this. Like, why don't we try it this way? Or some delegations just can't do that. It's just not in their culture. So I think it's all worked out pretty well at the moment. Ask me again after the games. I might be a bit more tired, but it's all worked out pretty well.
Nice. Well played. It sounds like you're fortunate, like I am in a sense, to have stumbled across university sport early on in your career, and then that's given you an opening. You've then gone ahead and worked extremely hard, gathered some very specific experience that has all laddered up to this opening now, which, you can never predict when you're starting your career, but, years later, the perfect opportunity and the networks that you've built all kind of align to a job that might become apparent in the future, because you could have gone off and done a whole bunch of other stuff, worked equally as hard, but your experience probably wouldn't have fit the role that you're doing now, and you wouldn't have the opportunity to manage 170 countries at the second largest sporting event in the world. So it's very, very cool to see where you've landed. One follow-up question to, I guess, the application process and why you were accepted. I'm going to ask you to pump yourself up, but it's for the purposes of people who want to know how they can stand out in their application for future jobs. And that is, what do you think made you stand out?
Yeah, I think I had obviously multiple roles in my CV, but it was very much saying what you've done in those roles. So the actual, for Unisport Australia, it was like started off a volunteer program from zero to having 250 volunteers across this many venues, like being very clear on what you have done as an individual to achieve success in that role. I could just say I'm a volunteer manager and I manage volunteers, which would have been fine, but it's the fact that I think I said I'm a volunteer manager. I started with nothing. I did this marketing campaign, did this to eventually lead to this. Very clear, very simple, what you've practically done to achieve it. The same with the volunteer roles. They are probably the most beneficial in my eyes to getting jobs. So I've done multiple Brighton Marathon volunteering, but it's not just I'm a volunteer at Brighton Marathon. It's I did this. I was in the water dispensary team. We made sure there was enough water in every checkpoint, etc. So it's very much being specific on the not the KPIs, but the similar things of what you have achieved, what you have done. The British University Sport Federation, for example, we had X number of athletes and universities going to the European University Games 1 year. 2 years later, when I was on board, we then created a whole document which showed the process, and then that created conversation to then lead to the biggest delegation ever going, and therefore winning medals. So it was very much this is what I did, this is what the success happened, and this is what I could do in your organization, or transfer the skills to do something similar in your organization. So I think it's just, the specifics, especially working in an international world, the words are not always the same. So delegation services is very common in some countries, not in others. You would say team services, or you would say international services. So it's being very clear on the specifics within the roles that you've done or the volunteering that you've done, and why they were so successful, and how you can do them again, or how you can do them differently in the role you're applying for.
I love how quickly you were able to articulate the exact numbers that you had contributed to, because I think, as you mentioned, some things can get lost in translation, but everyone understands numbers. If you've taken something from 0 to 200 plus venues with infinite growth, like, it doesn't matter where you come from, you can understand that that's a huge achievement. So I love how quickly you're able to kind of quantify the results that you were directly impacting. This has been amazing to learn about your career to date and what's coming up as well. One of the other things we love about you, Miranda, is that you're a great member of the SportsGrad community. I just wanted to ask, what led to you joining the SportsGrad community?
Yeah, I think for myself, I joined it when I was in Australia, because that was, I was living there. But it's probably been more beneficial for me since I've left, because then I've stayed in touch with certain people. Someone else in the community then took over my role when I left Unisport Australia, which I thought was super interesting. We spoke about that before she was applying and having conversations. So I think it's, very much network.
That was Hayley Gorman, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so she's now the current workforce coordinator.
We had her on the podcast about a month ago.
Perfect. So she's the current workforce coordinator leading up to the Canberra event. So it was Gold Coast last time, now it's Canberra. And for example, there's been people that have come over to the UK that are already in the UK, or that they're moving from Australia across, and they've messaged and said, love to have a chat, or just learned about university sport. What is it? Like, is there roles coming up that I can volunteer at or work in? So for me, it's the networking opportunity, and it's those short speed networking opportunities. For myself, it's always in the morning, which is very interesting because a lot of people that join are based in Australia and they're in the evening. So it's always a very different mentality, but it's, the network that you get, and it's just the building up of that LinkedIn, because you never know when you're going to need to ask them a question or talk to them about something. And having a member directory and just being like, I spoke to this person, well, that's their name, they're working there, or they can maybe help me with this issue, is super helpful. And I know definitely next year in 2025, leading up to the games, there will be specific people that I will need to reach out to in specific countries about specific things that I might have to spend hours Googling, searching on LinkedIn, whereas I can just go on the Discord app and search the network and be like, oh, okay, this person lives there, or they have lived there, maybe they can help me. I think that's for me, it's very much the international environment.
Amazing. And what kind of other professionals would you recommend get involved in SportsGrad?
Pretty much anyone that wants to have a network in sport. So it's not necessarily sport specific, or someone that maybe works in a charity that has sporting elements of it, or it's someone who works in grant writing, but they do grants for sport federations. So I think it's anyone that wants to kind of increase their exposure to sport, because some of these individuals work in sports that I've never heard of, or they work in companies I never knew existed. So I would just say anyone that's wanting to broaden their horizons, they might be perfectly happy in their role and excelling in their role, but they might be just interested to think, what about that? What about that? So I would say anyone working in sport internationally, nationally, locally, anyone. But anyone that wants to talk to other people or grow their network.
Amazing. We just had fellow SportsGrad member George Ludlow in a previous episode talk about how he used the network to move from London to Australia and arrive with a ready-made network. So that international networking piece seems to be a really beneficial thing for a lot of people. Miranda, final question before we wrap it up, but for anyone who was looking to take their career to a global international event, perhaps have missed out on the Olympics or the Euros, and they were unaware of the 2025 World Uni Games coming up next year, but now they do. What advice would you give to those people looking to stand out in their application?
Yeah, I would say just show that you want it and that you're ready for it, and that whether you're applying as a volunteer or a role, talk to someone who's already there or who's already doing something similar, because most of the case, for example, our volunteer program, we are looking for 12,000 volunteers. That is a lot. However, if you want to volunteer in the International Services Department, there is a code we can provide you internally that you can then get kind of pushed into that group and then get reviewed for that role directly, rather than being in that big cohort. So it's very much, I would say, if you're interested, contact anyone at the organization. Everyone's more than happy to welcome people or to kind of point people in the right direction, and then be very clear of what you want to achieve whilst you're there. So working in an OC is different because it's a limited time. That's always it. So you're there for a limited time, so you need to get the most you can get out of it. And a lot of people that have started the organization, especially recently, have been very clear, I'm coming to Germany for a year from Nigeria or somewhere, and this is what I want to achieve, this is what I can contribute, and this is where I'm going. So I think it's just making that very clear and being open and honest. Also, if you don't necessarily know, but you want to try event presentation or in the sports team, also totally fine, but just be very clear and show what you're wanting to get and wanting to give to the organization.
Amazing. Well, Miranda, thanks so much for giving me your time today to dive into the world of university sport. Certainly exciting with the World University Games coming up. Hopefully I'll be able to get over there next year. It'd be great to check out another games. It's been a long time since Taipei, perfect. So I'd love to get back over there. But thank you for sharing the ins and outs of what's involved in your role, because it is an area that not a lot of people know about, but thanks to you, we've been able to demystify that a bit. So appreciate you contributing to the podcast.
No worries. Thank you very much.
And for those people who want a bit more information about some things we talked about today, we mentioned George Ludlow. He's one episode back in episode 289. If you go a bit further beyond that, Hayley Gorman, you can listen to in episode 283. Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Miranda. Personally, I always love chatting with people who work in the university sports space. It's a big throwback for myself, and some of the best experiences I had in my time came working with Australian University Sport and at the conferences that they allowed me to attend, and at the World University Games in Taipei as well, where I made friends that I still catch up with today. So for Miranda to be able to experience that is absolutely awesome, and to chat to someone who understands what it's like too is cool for myself. But now we're going to dive into Ask SportsGrad, where every week we answer a question from our community. And if you would like to ask us a question, first become a SportsGrad member. Head to sportsgrad.com.au/community to join, and then you can add your question to the channel named Ask SportsGrad. Now, this one comes from Chris, and Chris says, any advice on how to tackle group interviews? I've never been in one before. Great question, Chris. And they do require slightly different preparation, because you are essentially being judged on how you interact with other people. That's why they're putting you in a group situation rather than an individual situation. And so they're going to be looking out for how you want to interact with other people in the room. Do you speak over the top of them? Do you work collaboratively with them? Do you listen to them? Do you add on to what they say? Do you compete with them? So my advice for this would be, don't sit back, but don't take up all the space. And what I mean by that is, don't be the most commanding voice in the room. If you've got something to say, make sure you back yourself. But then once you have the confidence to know when it's time to chime in and when it's time to hold back, then it comes down to your delivery as well. So essentially, you're going to be asked on, some of your experience and how you would go about doing different things. A lot of it's very situational as well. So that's where the same principles as a normal one-on-one interview apply, whereby I'd be looking at, make sure you have the star response down packed, make sure that you have all your best experiences written down and rehearsed, make sure you have a catalog of all the different examples that you can pick from, because essentially interviews are just a test of your self-awareness. How well do you know yourself and your career to be able to pick from the best experiences and use them appropriately? If you've heard our interview with Hamish McLaughlin back in episode 124, he mentioned how Bruce McAvaney, the famous Australian sports journalist, does this much, putting my hands really wide here, this much preparation, but he only uses this much. I'm doing a fraction of that with my fingers. And you never know which little tiny portion of that you're going to need. So the same goes for interviews as well, and group interviews too. Make sure you do a whole heap of preparation, because you never know which tiny little bit you're going to be. But other than that, I would really just make sure that you have a strategy going into it on how you are going to conduct yourself. So what I would be looking for if I was an employer in this interview, I'm not sure who you're interviewing with, but I would be looking out for the people who have the confidence in themselves to listen and sit back, but also the confidence to speak up and add something to the conversation when required to. I hope that one helps you, Chris. Now, if you'd like to ask us a question, or if you'd like to ask our friends in sport a question, such as the many people at the top of the episode who we've got coming up in our events, make sure you become a SportsGrad member. Every week we jump on a Q&A where you can ask us and industry professionals any of your questions. So head to sportsgrad.com.au/community to join. And once you're inside, you'll also get access to all the bank of recordings that we've done in the past, which is like Netflix for the sports industry. There's over 60 hours of exclusive content in there, which you can binge all you like. Until next time, find us on LinkedIn and give us some love with a rating if you enjoyed the podcast. Please subscribe on Apple or follow on Spotify. Every little bit helps us grow the show and create more amazing content for you. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next time. Hey friends, one last thing before you go. If you really want to make an impact in sport, then subscribe to the SportsGrad newsletter. Inside, we share all the latest job openings and networking events, so you're always aware of opportunities to land a job and grow your network. Plus, we share a Q&A with a professional on how they grow their career in sport. Here we talk about things like how they moved overseas or negotiated their salary or landed a new job or promotion, made a career change, and so much more. It's kind of like a little boost of inspiration in your inbox before the weekend. So If you're like us, you're career driven and you're keen to progress quickly, you're going to love the SportsGrad newsletter. To get it, head to sportsgrad.com.au/newsletter to subscribe or follow the link in the show notes. See you next time.